The Raptors lose a hard-fought match against the Milwaukee Bucks. 118-111 is your final. Welcome to Raptors Tonight. I'm Randy Urban, joined by Sherman Hamilton, Eric Smith, and Leo Rautins. Leo, I'll start with you. Raptors looked in pretty good shape there after that third quarter, but how were the Bucks able to regain momentum so quickly to start the fourth?
Well, if you look at the substitutions, the Raptors had, a different lineup out to start in the fourth. No Fred in the game, and things just kind of unraveled for them. They still hung in there. I mean, I not able to make a shot. Had turned the ball over. They just really struggled offensively. Still, their defense allowed them just not to completely get out of the game, but that was difficult. I thought the game was tremendous to that point, and I thought they played really well once they got Fred back in the game in the fourth quarter. But when you're playing against a team like Milwaukee, as well as they've been playing at home, that's a tough stretch to overcome. But fortunately, we're still able to stay in it.
Yeah, Eric, you score 39 points in the third. You seemingly get everything you want offensively, and then you can't score at all for 5 minutes. How does that happen?
I think to me, Randy, the big thing, and Leo touched on with Freddie being out, but I think the other key piece in that fourth quarter, at least the opening minute, 45, almost 2 minutes, was Jakob Poeltl on the bench as well. And Brook Lopez was kind of getting everything he wanted in the lane. A couple of buckets, both of them and ones. I think he had a third bucket and one just a couple of moments later, even after Yak had come into the ball game. And he was just kind of doing what he wanted those first couple of minutes. And that's where the momentum ultimately, to me, turned. And it was almost like the game was bookended with two different styles. Milwaukee came out in the first, really took it to Toronto on the perimeter, and then they cooled off. And then as the game went on, they started to do it in the paint more in that fourth quarter, really not living on the perimeter as much and trying to attack Toronto. And I think they just had the Raptors a little bit out of sorts there for 4 or 5 minutes in the fourth, and Toronto kind of scrambling to get themselves back in it.
Yeah. Sherm, Eric mentions Brook Lopez, and I'm sitting there and watching this guy. I'm like, it feels like every time the Raptors play the Bucks, he's the X factor. He just does something to break the Raptors back at the point where it's breakable.
That's what he does, though. I mean, you think about Brook Lopez when he entered the league, he was nothing like this player. And he's done a great job of evolving his game to the point where not only can he shoot the ball, which is typically what big guys will do, they'll go out there and shoot the ball, but he can put the ball on the floor, and he's not breaking you down with his handle, but he'll get to the middle of the paint, get to the basket because he handles the ball well enough. He protects it well enough. He's big, and he covers a lot of space. But we saw his versatility in this game in terms of he made some threes, but he also got to the basket. He played a little bit of low box basketball as well, and he continually put the back line of the Raptors defense in a compromised situation where he could get fouls as well. So, this is a deep Milwaukee Bucks team. And when you have Giannis out of the game, you have Chris Middleton out of the game, there's enough pieces, including a Brook Lopez, who can offensively keep this team flowing. And I just thought to start that fourth quarter, he was phenomenal while Giannis was off the floor. And he really offensively gave the Raptors fits with his size, his shooting, his ability to break them down off the dribble. I mean, he drove by Pascal Siakam one time like he was a guard. If you just kind of change his silhouette, it looked like Giannis going by Pascal Siakam. So he's just a wide load. He's a smart player, and he's just mastered a way of getting to the basket against smaller players.
He's been so good this season. I think as far as they'll go, it's going to matter how he plays. But obviously, Leo, it starts and stops with Giannis Antetokounmpo. How did you think the Raptors defended him tonight? Obviously, he had the triple-double. His perfect 9 for 9 from the field. But just outside of the numbers, what did you think?
I thought they did a really good job overall. I mean, you can't complain about it. Giannis, I think, adapted, to his credit. I think he saw what Toronto was doing. He moved the basketball. He didn't force a lot, and he got his teammates going. So he helped defensively. So in a not a super high scoring game, I thought he did a really good job. But you got to give the Raptors credit. I mean, they didn't allow him to dominate like we've seen in the past. And and there's another factor too. Okay, we talked about the substitution, but a guy who's become pretty important to this team is Scotty Barnes, right? Especially defensively. And not having Scotty to finish the game and help out at that end of the floor makes a big difference. But hey, this was a good game overall. I mean, the Raptors, I think, are showing they can play with anybody. And like I said, you get this game, you got 3 winnable games coming up. I think they're in a really good. They're heading to a really good place right now, and they just got to stay healthy and just keep going.
Yeah, Eric, it's interesting that Leo mentioned Scotty, because during those moments in the fourth quarter when you're kind of struggling to get something easy, he's got the ability to just come down and post his man up and score with his back to the basket pretty simply. And, you know, 1 or 2 of those early in the fourth quarter, and maybe that changes things.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's kind of his go-to, it seems, more often than not this season, right, Randy? Guys, it's like Scotty comes alive in that fourth quarter, seems to do a bulk of his damage in that fourth quarter. Not having him, I think, definitely hurts, whether it be scoring or distributing and moving the ball. You know, also just attacking that front line, you know, not to go too far back here, Randy, but even Brook Lopez, I thought, as much as we talk about his offense, he only had 2 block shots tonight, only had 5 rebounds, but just his looming presence in the lane, I think, changed a lot of shots, whether it be for Jakob Poeltl, whether it be for Freddie VanVleet driving to the 10. I thought just Lopez being there and his presence, his size, was a difference maker in some of the shot selection and some of the misses that Toronto ultimately had. And I think if a guy like Scotty is out there to spread a little bit more, his length, his ability to turn and finish, you know, those little frozen ropes, those little, you know, one-handers that he drops from 6, 8, 10 feet, that was missing. And hopefully, you know, knock on wood, that it's nothing too major. The X-ray is already negative. We were told he's going to be evaluated again tomorrow in Toronto, but Leo just touched on it. Health. That's been, to me, one of the biggest factors of this team playing well of late. They finally got healthy. They finally have had a set rotation. They know Gary Trent's coming off the bench. He started to turn a corner, has been playing so well, but the health is so key. They can't afford to lose Scotty or anybody for an extended stretch here with only, I can't believe we're saying, only 10 games remaining in the season.
Yeah. Sherman, let's talk a little bit about Fred VanVleet. Solid tonight, despite some of those turnovers there in the fourth quarter. How do you think he's able to be so effective against Drew Holiday? Because this is multiple games against the Milwaukee Bucks where he's been able to score. Drew Holiday is considered one of the best defenders in the league.
Yeah, so is Giannis. You see what Fred did to him in that quarter. But I will say this: Fred does not have any back down in him, and you know, this is a guy who's been told his whole career he's not good enough. He's too small. He can't make it in the land of giants. And what Fred has done is constantly worked at his game and manipulated the game into a position where he uses his size as his advantage. And Drew Holiday, to me, is on the all-time most underrated list in terms of NBA players in my book. He's so good on both sides of the basketball. And I love seeing Freddie and Drew go at it because it's a cerebral matchup. It's a very highly skilled matchup. It's a determination and toughness matchup. But what Fred did in that third quarter with the 11 points and the 5 assists was really, I mean, it was off the charts in terms of a game like this. You mentioned it wasn't a high scoring, but Fred found ways to score. And his balance over the last few games in terms of sharing the ball and scoring has been phenomenal. But what makes him so good is he's a very smart player. He's got that toughness. He's highly skilled. He's supremely skilled at his size. And he knows how to run a team. His leadership skill is off the chart. You can always tell, and you guys all know this, leaders know what play to make in what moment for the team that they're playing with. They understand how the team ticks. And Freddie does that so many times. He struggled in the fourth quarter with some turnovers, but there's no question, without Freddie in that game, the Raptors aren't even close to the Milwaukee Bucks.
Leo, there exists the very real possibility that the Raptors play the Bucks in the first round of the playoffs. So against a team like Milwaukee, how do you adequately guard the 3 and limit that penetration? Because we saw how hot they got in that first quarter, 7 of 11 from 3. And then you got a guy like Giannis who can get anywhere on the court with those strides. What do you do there?
Well, hey, that's a problem, right? I mean, Milwaukee's depth is a big issue. They got a lot of guys that can stroke the basketball. They can play inside, outside, and they do a great job of moving the basketball. So it really comes down to, look, for a large part of this game, the Raptors were right there, okay? They had the lead, and that lead could have been even bigger, if not for a couple plays here or there. So they know how to do this, and they show that they're capable of doing it. But the whole key is, what is playoff basketball? The details, right? You can't have lapses. You can't miss an assignment here. You can't miss a rotation there. You can't have bad shots helping Milwaukee get good shots. It really comes down to, once you get into playoff basketball, you're not gonna be able to allow any of those things to become factors. So I believe that they're a team, like everybody's been saying right here. When this team is healthy, when this team's playing together, they've shown they can play with literally anybody in this league right now. So the question is, can you get to that finish line healthy? And if you're playing Milwaukee, if that's the case, can you lock in on the details and not have any lapses that are going to cost you, like not have a start to the fourth quarter? And you know, you got to remember, like, okay, you also had like Will Barton and Pascal running the team at the start of the fourth quarter. Well, Will Barton's just, he's a new guy. You didn't have Scotty available to do that. So once you're in the playoffs, you can't have that happen, right? It's not going to happen. So, Nick Nurse is great at trying things out, and he's got a memory lock for everything he does during a regular season and how it impacts the game and an opponent. And he usually cleans it up and finds a way to do it in the postseason. So, like I said, I'm optimistic, regardless of who this team plays, that if they do those things, they lock in, they can play with anybody.
Yeah, Eric, if they do play the Bucks, there's certainly no intimidation factor going on there. The Raptors feel like they can beat them.
Yeah, I don't think there is. I mean, I think Nick Nurse even said it last week. I mean, of course, he's not going to say otherwise, but I think if you were to look at any guy in the eye, Randy, and I think you guys would all agree, I don't think any one of these players on or off the record would tell you that they're intimidated by the Milwaukee Bucks or anybody else at this point. I think that they feel like they can go into any game and they have a chance to beat any opponent in the league. And, Leo just said it. I think they've proven that for the better part of the last month or so with some of the big games that they played, the balance that seems to be in their lineup overall since the acquisition of Pirtle and since the overall health of the team has pretty much stabilized itself. And again, fingers crossed for Scotty Barnes. I think that they can hang with any team. And ultimately, it's going to come down to, I think, in the playoffs, can they crank up the defense a little bit more? Because they have proven that they can certainly score at will against a lot of teams, but can you stop teams as well? Or can you at least limit longer stretches? And that will be ultimately the key, whether they're facing Boston or Milwaukee or whomever it may be. And I guess the other thing too is, can you get to that 8th spot? You kind of let an opportunity, slip away tonight. You would have been able to leapfrog Atlanta with them in a surprise loss to San Antonio. I would feel a lot better, and I'm sure a lot of Raptor fans would as well, if you only had to win one game, as opposed to potentially, having to go out there and win 2. So it's going to be a dogfight here. But if they get in there, I'm not scared of anybody at this point.
All right, Sherman, we'll get out on this. Giannis Antetokounmpo recently commented on the lack of clarity in terms of who should get the MVP. Your thoughts?
Well, personally, my MVP plays both sides of the basketball. And Nikola Jokic is a great player offensively. He's a wizard with the basketball in terms of passing and scoring and footwork. He's a supremely talented big man. But he doesn't play defense. And I think when I look at my MVP, it's got to be both sides. And of Joel Embiid and Giannis Antetokounmpo, who those to me are the next 2 players that are in that discussion legitimately, I've got to go with Giannis because Joel Embiid does play defense sometimes. Giannis plays defense. He plays defense. There's a difference there. And his offensive numbers back up him being an MVP, and his team success backs up him being an MVP. So there's no argument to me. I feel like Giannis is the MVP. The problem is he might be getting some of that Jordan treatment, that LeBron treatment, where he could get the MVP multiple years in a row, but they just give it to other people sometimes. But I think this year he deserves it. He's a phenomenal player. I mean, you're great when your triple-double is as quiet as a mouse. And that's what his triple-double was tonight. It was a quiet triple-double. But that's what greatness does.
Leo, agree, disagree?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great points there. And I think, I don't know, I think of the players, Joel Embiid that were mentioned and Jokic and Giannis, Jokic is not as good a defender for sure, but he impacts winning in a big way. But there's one word Sherm used, sometimes. And when you say sometimes, the player that comes to mind is not Giannis and is not Jokic. The player that sometimes is Embiid. He's got more talent as Pinky than most players could ever dream of having. And sometimes you see it all. Other times he's just kind of He posts more than either of the other two, in a big way, I think. So that's where the MVP. It bothers me about that when everybody says, "Well, he deserves it. It's his turn." Well, I don't care. There's no turn. You don't get a turn at this. You either play the game at a high level, and you went back winning, and there's no question as to what you're doing on the floor, or you don't. And I think that's where Giannis and Jokic step above Embiid.
Who you got, Eric?
I'm giving it to Giannis. If I had a vote right now, it's Giannis. And it would probably be Embiid second and Jokic third. I just think that Jokic doesn't do enough defensively, and I think the Raptors exposed that a couple of times in the last couple of weeks. And Denver's been slipping and sliding. I think a lot of it is because they don't play a whole heck of a lot of defense led by their top guy. And I think we get bored. Sherm kind of said it too. Bored by greatness. We're talking about the Bucks being the number one team in the league. They've dealt with some injuries. They've dealt with Middleton out of the lineup for stretches and everything else. And here's Giannis just going about doing his thing. If I had a vote, he's got it.
Yeah, it's interesting. The on-off numbers for Jokic are off the charts. So it's going to be a difficult decision any way you go. Great stuff, though, guys. Good to stop you there. Next game for the Raptors Wednesday, back at home against the Indiana Pacers. Tip-off goes at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. And after the game, come on by Real Sports. Be a part of the show as we live stream to Raptors YouTube. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.